well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We just have a quick slideshow to run through with some information, and then you'll have the chance to ask questions to our panelists here. So, this is our Patman Political Engagement Project Information Session. So PEP, or Patman, is a collaboration between the Heart Leadership Program and the Paulus Center for Politics. So generally what that means is in the spring semester, you'll be working closely with Heart. We'll work with you over the summer as well, and in the fall, you have the opportunity to get really plugged in with Paulus and all of the events that they have and their student committee. So the Patman Political Engagement Project, the purpose is to inspire, cultivate, and prepare future leaders in democracy and provide them pathways to provide meaningful participation, contributing to more diverse and inclusive political representation at all levels in the United States. Also, we have microphones that we grab for the video.
While Lee's grabbing the microphones, I'll just interject and say, also, I'm Professor Andrew Nurkin. I direct the Heart Leadership Program and teach courses in facilitation and civic engagement arts policy. And Lee, our wonderful program coordinator at Heart, just kind of glanced on this as a collaboration between Paulus, which is Stanford's Center for Politics and Political Engagement, and can you hear me? Can you hear me without the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll just have it arm's length. And Heart Leadership, which is an undergraduate program focused on leadership development for the sort of ethical practice of leadership in public life. And we these forces combine to make this really exciting program, PEP, which has been around now for 5 years. This is our 5th iteration. Each year it's a little bit different, but we'll talk more about what's involved. Just so you know, it's sort of a collaboration of 2 full academic centers here at Stanford, although the program is, of course, open to students from any major across the university.
Yeah, I might use this. Right, so I also forgot to introduce myself. I'm Lee Adelblue. I'm the program coordinator for the Heart Leadership Program. And here we have... Hello.
Just in fact.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I apologize for being tardy. Let's see, I'm Professor Rose. I am the director of Paulus, co-sponsor of PEP, and excited to see you all.
Thank you. All right. So, who are our Patman Fellows? Patman is open to Duke Juniors in any major, and we are looking for students who are interested in political leadership, who want to develop leadership skills, who are interested in conducting a summer internship or their senior thesis research, and we're looking for students who are open to thinking deeply and challenging assumptions. And I'll also add to that, we are looking for students who love to, or who are excited about the option of critical reflection about their work to improve not just their leadership skills, but to understand who they are as a leader and what they bring to the table. So we have 5 components, more or less, to our project: a politically engaged spring course, monthly mentorship meetings with myself, funding for your internship or your thesis, summer reflective practice, and in the fall, a public purpose symposium to present your work. So our Spring Gateway course this year is going to be a class, Pub Hall 490S, Political Communications in a Social World. That'll be Friday mornings. And did you want to say anything?
Yeah, so this year we have kind of an amazing opportunity to have Lenny Stern, who was the director of Barack Obama's digital strategy for 2008 and 2012, and is the founder and head of CSK Communications. He's going to join us as an adjunct visiting lecturer, specifically to teach this class. It will be only Patman Fellows, only PEP students in the class, so just capped at 15, and there'll be a strong cohort component. The theme of this class is really, how do we communicate politically? Everything we do is political communications. Every time you post online, every time you engage in a conversation about issues that matter, it's political communications. And it kind of uses that lens to think through what are the strategies and aptitudes you might need as someone who's interested in political engagement or interested in political leadership to communicate effectively across a whole range of media. And he thinks about kind of what our public discourse is right now. Professor Stern's a really sort of exciting visitor for us. I'm very pleased that he agreed to do this. The other nice part about this is because Professor Stern has been out in the political world for a bit, he has a lot of contacts, and I think about 50% of the class meetings, if not maybe one or two more than that, will be joined by visiting lecturers who are sort of from his network. So it's in addition to his wisdom and expertise, quite a lot of exposure from folks who have been doing political communications across party lines in a bunch of different contexts for decades. That's why it's on Fridays, so those folks can join.
You will also have the great opportunity to have monthly mentorship meetings with me. These are meetings where you can refine your research questions and plan for your summer experience. It also doubles as an opportunity to engage in critical reflection about questions of ethics and political leadership. So there's kind of two tracks that you can take as a Patman Fellow. You can have a summer internship, or you can use the funding for your thesis research. So internships must be with a nonpartisan organization or agency that works broadly in the political realm. It has all of these different options here, so you can work with local, state, federal, tribal governments, think tanks, nonpartisan legislative or policy organizations, political media or news literacy initiatives, youth political engagement, redistricting and gerrymandering, voting rights and ballot access, democracy reform, democratic renewal, civic participation, and political communications. There's probably even more that you can do there. And your honors thesis research should be related to any of those topics or another aspect of political research, and the funding must be used during that summer, so not carrying into the fall. Through those monthly mentorship meetings, we will refine your question and figure out what your internship is going to be, but your final proposal must be submitted by April 1st in order to have approval for the funding.
I just want to tag quickly on that and say, if at this moment you don't have an idea for an internship or a thesis project, that's okay. If you just know this seems sort of interesting in some fun way, those monthly meetings with Lee are designed to help you track down the organization you want to work with or frame that research question that's going to guide your thesis. If you are doing a thesis in a department other than public policy, that's also, even in public policy, going to need to be done in conversation with your thesis advisor. But public policy thesis is a little differently timed.
All right, reflective practice. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, a major part of everything we do at the Heart Leadership Program is what we call the inner work of leadership. The idea that we learn something about how to lead ethically in collaboration with other people, not only by reading about it, in fact, not even primarily by reading about it, by doing it, by getting out there into the world, but then also taking a moment to reflect on those experiences and what they teach us about ourselves. So we have a series of guided reflections that we do with every student that participates in Heart, and I think over the past almost 40 years, the several hundred students who participated in our programs have found this to be one of the most important parts of their Duke experience. Because it's dedicated time to engage in structured reflection with a member of the faculty. And we ask you hard questions. And you should ask us hard questions as well. So we do that over the summer through two what we call letters home. We also believe that writing in a reflective mode and a narrative mode is a really powerful communications tool for leadership. So we ask you to write, a letter back. How's it going? What's up? What are you learning? And then we engage in that correspondence with you over the course of the summer. We also set aside some time to meet together over the course, usually by Zoom, over the course of the summer, and then certainly again in the fall, as we just did on Thursday, or sometimes pizza, to reflect on really what you take away from this. Sure. The other thing that we're, both Paulus and Hart, deeply committed to is that we want you to think about the public purpose of the work that you're doing. How does it actually impact people in the world outside of Duke? how are you impacted by those relationships? We're brainstorming a new event that we'll host annually, likely this spring, but then moving to the fall, which will be an opportunity for everybody involved in our leadership programs and also in Paulus to make that work visible to the public. So it'll be sort of conference style, where you can report back on what you did. More on that later, but just know that we want that fall after your summer experience to be one of taking that work more publicly and engaging a wider group of folks and making yourself accountable and disciplined. Professor Rose, anything to add on that?
I echo everything you said, Professor Rick, and I love that, and I don't know that we can do it that way. Being actively engaged with the
All right, so our application timeline. Applications are currently open. They can be accessed at that link up there. They are due by the end of the day on October 5th, and we will take a few weeks and then get back to you on the 23rd. So that's the day that book bagging begins for the next semester. So if you're accepted, you'll receive a permission number to enroll in Professor Stern's class for that Friday, Spring Fridays. All right, and now we're going to move into our Q&A portion. So here we have our two lovely Patman Fellows who I will ask you guys to introduce yourselves, maybe share what your projects were this summer, and anything else that you want.
Hi guys, my name is Katherine Thomas. I'm a senior majoring in public policy, doing a certificate in human rights and maybe a poli-sci minor. I'm not actually sure if it's, I don't know, Duke Hubs if they have it, I'm not sure. This summer I was in DC. I was also part of the Duke Engaged Democracy at Risk program. So through that program, I know some of you guys were there too, I was working at Issue 1, which is a cross-partisan democracy reform organization. I was on the research team there, really looking into issues. I have done a lot of work on voting rights, but this was really taking kind of one step back into election administration. So we were really looking at, the funding of our elections, protection for election workers, and trying to find research and find research questions that could help support our legislative work on those issues on the Hill. So I was doing a lot of work looking into turnover rates of election officials after 2020 and the violent threats they've faced. Also helping with some legislative work and just kind of got it really introduced into a lot of different realms of our work there. So that the Turnover Project also was looking at congressional staff pay and social media, just a lot of different projects. And I was also working on my thesis for public policy. Didn't get as much done this summer as I had hoped, but working on it rigorously now. And that project is really looking into the landscape of on-campus voting or on-campus early voting on college campuses. So kind of trying to understand how colleges and universities can work with local county election boards to use early voting as a means to decreasing barriers that students face when trying to cast their ballot and engage in our democracy. So that's been really interesting so far. I'm doing data analysis, interviews, and a survey, which is a lot, and maybe I should have calmed down a little bit at the beginning, but it's been really fun. I've had a lot of really interesting conversations. Also similar to this summer, getting to talk to election officials and those actually running our elections and understanding the challenges and perspectives that they're coming to the conversation with, which has been something really eye-opening for me through PEP that I hadn't had the exposure to before, is just talking to election administrators. And that was also something I did in my project for the class, which I can maybe dive more into later, realizing that I've talked to a lot of election directors in the last 8 months or so. But that's been kind of the overview. So the thesis and then my summer internship. I was doing both this summer.
So I also did both an internship and a thesis this summer. They weren't as closely related as Kathleen's was, but the focus up there is the topic of my honor thesis. It's basically looking at the impact of the Parental Rights and Education Act in Florida, which censors discussion of LGBT topics in Florida's public schools. And so similarly, I didn't get a lot of that done as I'm doing the internship. Everyone's like, work on it over the summer, and it's like definitely helpful if you work on it over the summer, but the bulk of my work came when I was not also doing a full-time job, so it was before my internship and then after. So that was the thesis work so far has been involving kind of talking to leaders of LGBTQ advocacy organizations in South Florida to kind of get their perspective on how the demand for their services, their youth group services, has changed and kind of what policy changes they've noticed
as a result of this law. So it's been a lot of like qualitative interview data gathering that way, and then also some content analysis of like different literature put out by the county school boards in response to this law and like what's changed in response to that law. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other thing I did for my internship was I worked also in Florida by, I guess serendipitous chance as a labor organizer. And so it's honestly a similar landscape. A lot of it is like starts at the state legislative level. Basically over the summer, Florida passed a like union busting bill that basically made it a lot harder for union members to keep their bargaining rights or to join a union. And so that was also a lot of like really relational like conversation work where I was going into different work sites every day and talking to different members of labor unions, talking about why it's important to have a union and what they can do to keep their union rights. So if you want to ask me about either of those things, I'm happy to talk about them. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and open it up. Does anyone have any questions? Go for it.
Hi, thank you guys for speaking with us tonight. I'm wondering, what your sort of process was to come to the decision of, what you would be doing with your summers. Where were you last year at this time? And then how did the, spring semester sort of help you figure that out?
I had no plan at this time last year. Absolutely no plan. Yeah, so don't worry. I would say I knew to graduate I needed to do the pub hall thesis. That was kind of goal number one. And I started looking and applying probably halfway through the semester. Things just open up a lot later than a lot of other majors and industries. So really started applying over winter break. Applied to Duke Engage. Got that worked out and I ended up being really happy with my placement. I think it was the perfect fit for me. So even beginning of the spring semester, I had no real plan. I knew I wanted to do a thesis because that was a goal of mine since coming to Duke, and I had a broad understanding of I really into this democracy and voting rights thing, and I think youth and student voting rights is really cool, and I just knew I was going to do something in that realm, but that was a very broad landscape. So I knew I was going to do a thesis, and I knew I was going to do an internship, just had no idea where or what, and it all kind of worked out, I think, perfectly.
Yeah. Honestly, similar thing here, where I knew I wanted to do a thesis, but I didn't know that I was going to spend my whole summer doing that. I had known from previous internship experiences that I was looking for something that was a little different than that. I'd done a lot of office work or legislative advocacy work within North Carolina. That's been super fulfilling, but I felt like I wanted to, spread my wings and work in a different policy area, different state. And so again, it was mostly during the spring that I kind of refined that. And I think what Patman had helped me do with that process was not have such an anxiety to take, the first thing that was offered to me. Having both the funding and as well as the faculty support, trying to figure out what you can do, and what fits into the realm of political leadership. Having those conversations has really helped me see democracy, political leadership is something that's broader than what I had initially conceived. So I actually I was for pub hall you start working on your thesis in the spring, and so I took a class on that, finished the proposal by the end of the spring semester. But my internship I didn't get an offer until pretty late in the spring semester. And so it was definitely nice to have the certainty of knowing that, even if I don't get the internship I want, I can devote a lot of time on working on this thesis. And obviously there's no pressure to do both, but it just did give me a lot more, flexibility in trying to figure out my options.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions about the general program, if that's okay, or are we just doing questions? Okay, yeah. So I have two, but the first one is just about the process of, for those who are wanting to go the more internship route of what support Patman and PEP provide. I know you talked about the monthly meetings with you, but I'd love to just hear more about that, or if it's more you're just on your own and the funding just comes from that.
You're not on your own. Yeah. So, and this is a little bit different each year, but what we're planning for this year is, through those monthly meetings with Lee, you'll start at the beginning of the semester, and also with Paula's team as well. So this is really big collaboration between the two. two centers. To start by asking you, what are you thinking about? Where you imagine yourself being, if it's a place, if it's an issue, if it's a kind of genre of work, you really want to get experience with a think tank, you want to get experience with issue advocacy. And that'll help us to start sending you in certain directions. Then you'll do some research on your own. A lot of times what we end up doing is matching you with organizations or individuals where we already have contacts. The nice part about working with Hollis and Heart Leadership is that we've been doing this for a while, and so we know people who are placed well in a variety of different fields, and sometimes we can make those suggestions. We don't have, at this point, a set, like, there's someone who always has an internship with X organization, but sometimes we can sort of help point you in the right direction.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then my second question is about the actual internship funding that goes along with that. I know that there are the restrictions for like what organizations you can work with, but I'm also curious if there are other restrictions, like it can't go to like a paid internship, or if it can only be used for like housing or food, or other restrictions like that. If it can be used to pay yourself for an internship, stuff beyond just like working for a non-person.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Back to you all on this, but I feel like when we started, it maybe have some insight, but I do feel like it was topping off, and maybe not duplicating. I could be wrong about that in terms of like, because I know there's some funding that Stanford gives that is on top of that. One of the things I know we've had some conversations about in the past is whether it could fund campaigns, like internships on campaigns. I believe that's actually not allowed because it's taking in-kind donations to the campaign itself. Aside from that, though, I think that list was pretty comprehensive, and I think we've got a lot of flexibility on how you fund. And the amount is also, I feel like, I want to say $3,000 amount, but I always forget whether that was in addition to the Stanford, like if you qualify for Stanford funds, then you get a total of $4,000, or if there's a max.
The 3,000 is the baseline for us, and then if you're a public policy major and you're receiving internship funds, that's a little bit extra. It's not, you could have a paid internship on top of it. What we ask you to do is actually build a budget for us. It's not like we're only going to approve part of the money, but we want to see kind of what your total expenses are, what your income streams are, in part because one thing we always keep an eye out is, there's a lot of funding opportunities around Duke, and sometimes you end up with folks that have like a little from here, a little from there, a little from there, and then that starts to become quite a lot of money, more than you could reasonably spend in the summer, and the goal is to support your living expenses for research or an internship. So we just keep a little bit of an eye on that, but it's not that you can't also be paid for your internship necessarily.
I would say that, Stanford also offers honors internship funding, so I was able to receive both funding for my internship and Patman funding, but I think what this funding is good for is that when you apply for thesis funding, you have to budget it as going to compensating interview participants, for instance, or like buying a certain thing, or like something that has to be like itemized and written off as like an expense of your thesis. But PEP allows you to kind of conceive it as like a cost of living like stipend, right? Like, because for the time you're engaged in doing that thesis research, you're not earning money, right? Like, so it really allows me to, not to have that space to like fully dedicate to doing the research in like the way I want to do it and with the care that I wanted to give to it. So yeah.
What were your main reasons for applying for the program?
For PEP? Do you want to go first? No, you okay. So I mentioned the thesis was something I always wanted to do too. This is like really nerdy to me, but when freshman year, maybe the summer before, we had like not much to do. It was COVID times, so I made this like list of like all the things I wanted to do when I was at Duke, and PEP was like at the top of that list. And then as I got involved in Vast Connections and in other research projects, I just kept meeting people who were in PEP and like who were just really cool people. I'm not trying to say that I think now we're really cool people. I think you are. But like I was always like really inspired by like the work they were doing and the work that they went on to do after Duke. And so I kind of just like always wanted to be a part of that community. I think just kind of the people I looked up to, and then the resources and network, and cohort and community, all of that. Is that at all coherent?
I totally agree. Yeah, with the like idea of like people who are involved in like Paulus and Heart and like people who are my friends in classes. They talk very highly about both programs, and so I wanted to be able to get involved in that in a similar way. I think also what drew me to it is the ability to kind of combine coursework with like a more realistic, I guess, engagement with the political world. So through conversations that we were able to have with like local leaders, advocates, as well as class activities. I know this time's class is a little bit different, but for the class that we took, we were able to engage with a community nonprofit, and basically they had a research need that they had for us. They were all, in some sense, involved in kind of like political engagement. So I did a project with the voting rights group, and so like that kind of opportunity to have both the guidance of like a class and a professor, but also being able to put that into practice in terms of like what will this mean for like a potential career, and just having a space to explore that really stood out to me.
I noticed like for the internships, like there were qualifications of what kind of internship you had to have. And I wonder if there were like any qualifications on what kind of thesis you had to be writing. Did it have to be like, I'm assuming it's concerned with like political organized, something similar, but are there like strict boundaries on what it could be?
Very broad. And my sense is like as you have those reflective conversations, still being able to connect what you're working on with your broader development as a leader, I think it's very useful and worthwhile.
Immediately my head was starting to think of like, well, we would never do a thesis in like or answers. But of course, as soon as I said it, it's like, absolutely, I think any topic structured around the contemporary political question can be really interesting.
Just to clarify, if we're interested in doing like an honors thesis, we also take the honors thesis class in addition, and then we have a thesis advisor who's okay. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I guess this might be a little bit of a personal question because I think I'm two non-Paul majors in the room. Like, any thoughts on like thesis things would be very different for a Paul major, or at least a little bit different. How like the program accommodate for that?
Generally, your thesis.
But I guess
I will say, just generally, we're excited to have our Pub Hall students, also equally excited to have non-Pub Hall students, and I think that is the way the program has evolved over time. Initially, and we opened it up because we feel like this investment in leadership and democracy work has so much purchase or capital people across campus. To my mind, the thesis, I was thinking even your question about whether you have to be enrolled in the course, I do know Pub Hall students who've taken independent studies and completed their theses with faculty outside of that traditional trajectory. My sense is that would work fine. Professor Norton, do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's right. You said that I'm supervising a student now who's doing the independent study course through the thesis, which is totally fine. The big distinction is, as I understand it, not every department has the same calendar for the thesis work. So Pub Hall thesis begins in the spring of your junior year and continues to the fall of your senior year, whereas many departments will just start your senior year. So you would have to know going into that summer before your senior year what your thesis topic was and have your faculty advisor selected. Most departments that should be fine, but that's the only thing I do. Yes, please do.
Some of the policy programs that we're hoping the PEP students will enjoy. So one of the things that we're a little bit of a tweak this year is a really robust invitation to the PEP students to become members of the policy committee, which Edda knows a lot about as one of our co-presidents. And so this is a student community where there's a lot of opportunity to engage in events with elected officials and leaders, to gain access to special opportunities to connect. So maybe there are like small dinners that will happen after someone's visit. Rhiannon also knows a lot about politics. We're trying to recruit Rhiannon to work and all of you. And so, the Policy Student Committee is one of those organizations where there's a light application process, like just filling out a Qualtrics form. Basically, anyone who goes through the process and offers good faith answers, we're excited to welcome into the community. And you can engage as much or as little as you wish. So we know that you're super busy, and so there might be a time when you have less bandwidth to come to events and come to talks, but then sometimes you might have a lot more. But what's exciting is for the PEP fellows and that broader PSC community, there's some really special opportunities to connect that are separate from what we offer the general body.
And also some fabulous people that are coming this year in your distinguished fellowship.
We're excited. So a couple of previews.
I mean, name drop.
Yeah, this week alone, we have Congressman Jeff Jackson, a member of the North Carolina delegation, coming in on Thursday. We have a number of policy distinguished fellows. So very prominent journalist John Harwood, who's a Duke alum, is going to be our fellow for this year. He's doing a podcast that he's called The Devil. He's very excited about it. Stay tuned. I think you all are going to be blown away by his first guest. So, stay tuned for that. We've got Reggie Love, who was President Obama's body man, like one of his aides, and then Huma Abedin, who's still the chief of staff for Hillary Clinton. They were two of our fellows from last year, and we were supposed to have a big event with them that got rescheduled, so we're hoping to also tee that up this term. So if there are special opportunities to dine with them, to connect with them, have coffee or tea with them, you all will hear about it.
I just also had one more question about PEP. This is probably relevant. I'm actually a sophomore, and I was just wondering if there's any ways to follow up on the work that PEP is doing, in addition to the Instagram. If there's a newsletter that people can subscribe to, just to see what work other PEP alumni or people like that have done, just to kind of get an idea of looking ahead, what that might look like.
On the ball, amazing. So a couple of things. One, I would say, get involved in Hollis and join the student committee. Though it sounds like maybe you're already. We will add all of your names to the Heart Leadership Program newsletter as well as to the Hollis newsletters to sign in. So you'll get periodic updates from us. I would also say Heart Leadership has other programs, including service opportunities in leadership, which is open to sophomores. So we can follow up about that. And we've had lots of students actually do both in sequence, soul, and PEP. And then stay tuned to our respective websites. The one other thing, Heart Leadership Program, we just launched a new website this summer, and it includes a student projects database that has every Heart-funded student research project going back to 2011. So you can search on that just for some inspiration.
I'm wondering if you guys might share a little bit about the critical reflection part of Heart and what that has meant to you.
Yeah. So I think the letters home over the summer were really a good part of that because I don't know, during the summer when you're doing just kind of everyday work or you're setting up yourself for some larger products down the road, it's hard to keep track of the why of it because you're so mired in the what. And so the letters home for us were structured just take a moment from the summer and a moment that caused you to reflect or think about something that you hadn't previously thought about. And so it forced you to put the kind of moments of almost mundanity of you're just going through the motions, doing the work, and put that in a larger context of to stay oriented with the why. And so they didn't feel like I was doing that much work at all. It felt like I was talking to this professor who I got to know really well over the last semester. And then kind of be able to engage in dialogue. After writing a letter, after getting her response back, we had a Zoom call. And so it really having those check-ins throughout the summer kept me grounded in what the reason for the work was.
Yeah, I think the summer was a big summer of growth for me, just in terms of my confidence that I would be okay in the time after Duke, and these letters were really fun to write. It's scary out there. I wasn't sure I was going to make it. These letters were really fun. I remember sitting in one of the 1,000 tates in DC underneath a really cold air vent and just recapping the week, or I think I was writing about a specific coffee chat I had with someone who we both knew similar professors who were doing research in youth voting rights, and he was the guy who wrote a lot of the bills he's represented Mickey Williams, one of his so he rightfully all of these bills. He was kind of geeking out over youth voting rights, stuff that most people don't you just can't geek out with them in the same way. I think I came to our event, our session after that, and I was like, guys, I just had the best coffee chat. So it was really fun just to kind of get to relive those moments, and then the discussion back and forth, I think was really impactful for me. And like, you know, I think the summer was really big for me, and also just taking the time to kind of reflect on those smaller moments. And now I can have this like literature looking back, that I can remember where I was in that moment, what I was feeling, and how, you know, just what I was thinking and how it was affecting and changing the decisions I planned to make after Duke as well.
Yeah.
Maybe one closing question for both of you. Was there a moment from this summer that can really kind of crystallize your experience or represent some of the learning that you took away that you wouldn't have been able to do if you had done that?
For me, it's a moment from my internship, and it was kind of early on. It was when I was really just learning about the structure of what like labor organizing is and what that means. And so like it's very different than what you think of like traditional political organizing as, because it's basically like people elect representatives in their workplace, so people who've been in the job for a long time and who know the work, to be their union representatives, and then they come to the council, which is like the union, whatever, like union hall, and they tell us what they need, and we send out our organizers and we, you know, allocate our resources to whatever they ask of us. And so being able to engage in the like critical reflection of like PEP in the previous semester and this summer helped me like recognize that for how special it was and how unique it was, like a different model of political leadership. And like if I hadn't had PEP, I wouldn't have been able to think of that as something so special, or as like a model for like larger political leadership. It's like being able to be in PEP and have those conversations consistently has allowed me to think about like what it means to be a leader and like what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, and like kind of like dissect the like concept of leadership as a whole, and like I don't know, think about it in like ways that aren't the like academic legislative kind of path. Allowed me to really engage with like what the leadership structure was in my internship.
I think one thing we talked a lot about in the class was the relevance of local and state politics, just like in our governmental system. In the summer at issue 1, we hosted a fly-in. So we had about 24 election officials come from all across the nation, come to DC. These were some were secretaries of state, some were county election directors. We had some, you know, just volunteer poll workers. So really everyone from the top down. And when they were there, we got to meet them and talk to them and listen to the challenges that they're facing in our election administration. And then the next day, we took them all to the Hill and had meetings with senators and representatives. And I was, you know, as the intern, just kind of sitting there taking notes. But it was really powerful to listen to the stories they had, and you know, people slamming chains down their desks and you know, stalking them at their nephews' baseball games, and just like going up until like the legal point of like where you can get the police involved and like file a restraining order, but like making it impossible for these people to do their jobs, which is like running our elections and running our democracy. And I think this was a piece of the puzzle that I hadn't slowed down and like thought about until this summer. And just really understanding these people is like, for a lot of these folks, you know, they're working at their county government, you know, a lot of these folks have been doing this for 20, 30 years, and this is the first time that they're like making national headlines for like doing their job, which is effectively like a rank and file county government administrative task. And now they're like, you know, facing getting death threats and all this. So just really being able to hear their stories and hear the needs that they have, and like the way that they're pleading to our elected officials. And these are folks that are not all Democrats, not all Republicans. They cover every breadth of the political spectrum, which was a really refreshing like take on bipartisanship for me. Like I think especially at Duke, we're always tend to be a lot more surrounded by just like an echo chamber of voices. But to hear folks that, you know, self-identified as Republican and Democrat coming and asking for the very same thing on a topic that's been so polarized was really powerful, and like it was just and I think that week has really stuck with me. And then getting to talk to some of those folks even more afterwards, doing Q&A interviews and stuff for our website was just really powerful in the way that, you know, they're just doing their job and they're just trying to like make sure our democracy can operate and we can have elections. And they're facing such stringent opposition. You know, we can talk more about why, but I think that really opened my eyes to just like how many different players there are in the system as a whole. and what leadership looks like and like what their definition of just leadership and patriotism and how they embody that in a lot of really interesting ways.
Thank you both for sharing this.
Any final questions?
No, I was just going to ask Mr. Rosie anything else.
I actually just had one last question. In terms of like the project theme, like I know that it's been like reiterated that it has to be like obviously like related to like political things and like political themes, but could that like draw back to just like a social issue, like just like regular social justice issues, for example, like criminal justice? Like I feel like because like it's like involved in like broader political spectrum, could it be like something like working with like a nonprofit related to that or things along that realm, even if it's not like directly related, would that like go on?
I think that's absolutely in my fellowship. Yep.
Yeah.
The big theme here is democracy, right? How do we make this project function well and better than it has been recently? And so, to the extent that all of the social issues that you're talking about intersect with that in some capacity, absolutely.
Like, I know that a lot of themes are like mostly focused on U.S. politics. I was just curious about how like there were like alumni that were like international students who were not necessarily like not really like close to like U.S. politics.
We absolutely had international projects before. For sure. Depends a little bit on the context where you're headed, but again, as long as it's sort of politics and the functioning of democracy and democratic governance, that fits right in. I think it's always interesting if there's an intersection there with U.S. politics in some capacity. So we had a student 2 years ago, Cole, whatever, did a project on sort of intersection. He was working for this organization called the Black China Caucus, which was about building bridges between sort of congressional representatives in the U.S. and folks who are interested in China and Chinese politics. Sort of how the congressional. Did I get that right? It's pretty close. Okay. So for sure.
All right. Thank you, Anisha and Catherine, so much for joining us.
Great. So, apply now. If you go to our website, heart.sanford.edu, you can find out more about this program and the other programs that Heart has as well. And then the application link is there as well. If you haven't had the chance to sign in yet on that sheet of paper, please do so before you leave, and we can send you a follow-up email with the application link and deadline. So,
October 5th.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
I'm graduating in
Yeah.